Morning. Good to see everybody here today. We have a few people gone. Matt's at work, and Martha's at work, and she's in the back. She's at work. She's back there with the kids there. So anyhow, maybe I don't remember to turn our other sound system on. She could probably hear back there if we did. I got to throw another cough drop in. I'm getting over my cough, but alas, Sherry is getting that cough, so she's not with us. She's either gone to the clinic or she's going to go there later today to get whatever medicine she needs, because she's supposed to babysit the grandkids all weekend, because Adam and Ashley are going to be heading out of town to go on a short little vacation. They've been doing a lot of work on their home, and they're just kind of tuckered out. They just need some time to themselves for a while. So anyhow, pray that she gets better fast. Part 2, the vanity of human pursuits. We're continuing our journey through the book of Ecclesiastes. And last time we discussed the vanity of wisdom, learning that godly wisdom is great. Let's get that, hang on to it, hold on to it, never let it go. The wisdom that was spoken of is that human wisdom that people like to search for all the time. And it seems to be, I think, even more this day and age with the immediate access that we have of internet and all the information that comes through that. You grab your phone, do a search, and there you go. And remember, only 25% of what you find on the web is actually true. I don't know where they came up with that figure, but it just helps to remind us that everything needs to be verified. Self-indulgence. We talked about that last week. It is vain to go that route. It's vain to live wisely. Again, this relates to that human stuff. Just to illustrate the idea here, you can find all kind of stuff about how to parent. God tells you how to raise your kids. Raise your kids that way, and you'll be much better off. Toil. We're going to be looking more at that in our study today, which is under the title of Wealth and Honor. We're going to be spending our time in chapter 5 and chapter 6 of Ecclesiastes, if you'd like to be turning your Bibles there. Chapter 6 will not be looking at in great detail, because chapter 6 actually does a really good job of illustrating the points that we're going to visit in chapter 5. Three areas we're going to look at. Number 1 is the bad behavior that is so prevalent around us. Secondly, we're going to look at careers in context. And then thirdly, we're going to look at some gifts that God has given to us. So let's begin. In chapter 5, verses 8 and 9, this is what Solomon writes. If you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the province, don't be shocked at the sight. For one official watches over another official, and there are higher officials over them. After all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land. These days, it seems like justice is becoming a lost commodity. I don't know about you, but I pray for justice a lot. It seems like I'm praying for that quite a bit. And it's not that I want to see people get what they deserve. Because really what people deserve is the cross. Christ died for us. And because Christ died for us, He granted us mercy based on a loving compassion that only God can provide. So, that said, we would still like to see justice prevail a little bit more often than what we do. But this text tells us not to be surprised when we don't. But this text also tells us that those who do the oppression, are they themselves going to be oppressed? Now, is this karma? Is this how they say, what goes around comes around? Well, maybe, but the main point is we don't see everything that's going on behind the scenes. It tells us that God's hand is behind all of this. He's got everything under control. As a matter of fact, one commentator I read, if you look there, it says higher officials in verse 8, plural. He ties this to the triune God. He ties this to the Godhead. Yeah, and if that's the case, if that is something that we can derive from this, it does mean that God, He sees everybody that is oppressed. This is not a lost concept. When you look at Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, what does He say about the lilies of the field? What does He say about the sparrows? He takes care of the birds, right? He says, will He not much more then take care of us who are of greater value than the birds? Jesus died on the cross not for animals. He didn't die on the cross for birds. He died on the cross for us. We are the ones that God has in mind. Okay? So don't be surprised at all the injustice. Don't be surprised when you see poor people being oppressed, because that is the natural order of an earth that is ruled by Satan. Paul told the Ephesians, he is the prince of the power of the air. He says, our warfare is not against physical kingdoms. It is against those wicked forces. And so we just need to understand that that's just a part of the way that this world works. Look at verse, I should mention 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. It says that everybody is going to stand before the judgment seat of Jesus Christ. We're all going to have to give an account. Thank God for those of us that have the advocate, as John calls Jesus. When we stand before the throne, He's right there. So every time God might point an accusatory finger, being right, doing so, He looks at us through the blood of Christ. Thus, not being able to condemn us. It's not going to be that way for others who don't have Christ, though. Verse 9, I want to read this from two versions because I want us to get a clearer idea by the way that this passage can be translated. And the commentators at this point will tell you, because of the syntax and language used here, it's kind of difficult to translate it. And so that's why I want to read both passages. The first one is from the New American Standard, and again, it reads, after all, a king who cultivates the field is an advantage to the land. You get the idea from this that the land does better if a king is cultivating the ground. But is that true? He has no control over rain amounts. What if there's a drought? He can cultivate all he wants. If God doesn't provide rain, it isn't going to grow anything, right? That's why I want to read this one from an older version of the ASV. Moreover, the profit of the earth is for all. The king himself is served by the field. I think that really gives a clearer picture of what's going on, and I think it fits better within the context of everything being discussed here. You know, if justice is going to eventually prevail at some time, what does that tell us? God's in control. God is also in control of the seed that has to be germinated, the water that hits that seed. I was working in the yard the other day. I don't have any grass growing yet. Why? Because the ground temperatures aren't warm enough. All right? But I had some piles of leaves that I wanted to clean up. Every single pile of leaves that I removed from the yard, there is green underneath it. So now my yard looks weird. I got spots of green amongst the brown. But why is it green? It's because the leaves insulated the ground, causing it to warm up quicker than the ground around it. That's why my grass and weeds are growing there. Okay? God's in control of all that. So anyhow, that's really what we need to understand. The point about the vanity here of this human pursuit is simply that we need to be clear. Evil is still going to exist, but God is in control. Okay? God's in control. Secondly, I want us to look at verses. This is actually chapter 5, verses 10 through 17. But I want to break it up a little bit because there's really two things that are talked about here. So read with me, if you will, verses 10 through 12. It says, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what's the advantage to their owners except to look on? The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach of the rich man does not allow him to rest, doesn't allow him to sleep." The discussion here, the context within this individual's career is covetousness. That's what's being talked about here. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money. They covet it. In the Ten Commandments, I think the last one, you can double check, but at least in Exodus, the way it's written in Exodus chapter 20, verse 17, it says, you shall not covet. All right? What is coveting? Another word would be avarice. Another word, the attitude behind coveting is, I don't have that and I want it. That's really what coveting is here. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, 1 Timothy 6:10, it reads, "For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil, and some by longing for it have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many a pang." Money's not evil. Let's get that straight. It's the love of money. Okay? And I wanted to, I asked the question, okay, what is the word for love here? Because we've discussed love in the past in the Bible, because in our language, when we say the word love, it's not really clear. what we're talking about. But if you were speaking Greek as they spoke Greek, the word here for love, they got it right away. Right away. The word that's used here is philarguria, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right because I'm not Greek. But this word is translated the love of money. And so the Greeks actually have a specific word for this. And again, it literally translates avarice. The root word translates covetousness. And so it's the coveting of money. If you're in Timothy, look at 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 18 through 20, because there's a question that I want to pose from this. Let me read it, and then I'll give you the question here. This command I entrust to you, Timothy, my son, in accordance with the prophecies previously made concerning you, that by them you may fight the good fight, keeping faith and a good conscience, which some have rejected and suffered shipwreck in regard to their faith. Among these are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have delivered over to Satan, so that they may be taught not to blaspheme. So the prophecies referring to Timothy, back in Acts, I want to say about chapter 3, there were a few people in the church and the kingdom that were called aside, and they were given specific ministries. Okay, Timothy is not mentioned there. Saul or Paul, however, was. And so there seems to be the idea that there were prophecies like those given to these men, similar to Timothy. And so Timothy is given a divine ministry. His preaching isn't from Paul, it's from God. That's what these prophecies are referring to. If that's the specific situation there in Acts chapter 3, fine. We don't know enough about it. But we do know that there were specific prophecies given by God to individuals on Timothy's behalf to preach. Now, because Hymenaeus and Alexander are mentioned along with Timothy here, it kind of gives the idea that these two guys also had some specific things spoken about them regarding preaching God's word. Timothy is being encouraged here to remain on in Ephesus to continue preaching to those people there. These other two fellas, they quit. Why do people quit serving Christ? Is it not because they covet something else? So the question is, can coveting be related to idolatry? If we're supposed to worship God, right, and people choose not to worship God, they choose to worship something else, they leave God and go here. If we're not worshiping God, we're idolizing something else. Does that make sense? So there may be a correlation there. Here's some illustrations of emptiness, and I'm going to go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. He illustrates it in verse 11. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. Well, that makes sense, right? Product can drive market. If there's more of a product, there's going to be more of a market for it, right? What would be a good way to illustrate that? There's a big market for Ford's Maverick. It's a unibody. It's considered a small truck. And there are a ton of things that you can do to this thing. like they had back in the day when you had the even smaller trucks like the Datsun or the Ford Courier or the Chevy Love. People were doing all kinds of things with those. And I was looking at used prices on the Maverick. It's the used prices are insane, because there's a lot of interest in it. So that's kind of what's going on here. There's nothing wrong with that unless you're coveting, right? That's when it begins to be a problem. Verse 12 is there as kind of a comparison. If you're not coveting, you're just doing your job. You're just going to work. You're earning a living. You're doing that thing that God wants you to do, because if you don't do it, He says, a person that doesn't work, don't let him eat. Scripture says that. Okay, if a man won't work, neither should he eat. And so you're just going to work and you're enjoying the day, whatever your job is, and you come home and you work really hard that day, you have dinner, and you just sleep really well, right? Whatever your job is. If your job is physical, you put a lot of energy in it. If your job is more managerial, do you put less energy? No, it's a different energy, but you can still get you get mentally tired, right? And then you rest well. But if you have the wrong focus, if it's just all about coveting and getting more and more and all that kind of stuff, you go to bed thinking, I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be at getting A, B, and or C. Usually and C. And so it's a restless sleep. And that's kind of that's what's being talked about here. Look at the next few verses here, 13 through 17. There's a grievous evil which I've seen under the sun, riches being hoarded by their owner to his hurt. When those riches were lost through a bad investment and he had fathered a son, then there was nothing to support him. As he had come naked from his mother's womb, so he'll return as he came. He'll take nothing from the fruit of his labor that he can carry in his hand. And this also is a grievous evil. Exactly as a man is born, thus will he die. So what's the advantage to him who toils for the wind? Right? Can you grab the wind? It's just not going to work. Throughout his life, he also eats in darkness with great vexation, sickness, and anger. And what's being discussed here is just simply greed. And this comes from the word hoarding that is used here. It actually comes from two Old Covenant words, Aramaic words. the two, not Aramaic, Hebrew, two words. And one of them is hedge. A hedge is not a bad thing. A hedge, depending upon the context, it can be a good thing. Shepherds, at night, they would try to find a place where they could easily protect the flock. And the best places would be those places like in the hill where you're surrounded on a couple of sides, 2 or 3 sides. And so the fence that they put up doesn't have to be, it doesn't take a lot of work to put it up, right? Sometimes, they didn't have all of that, so they had to work a little bit more to construct that hedge. So a hedge can be a good thing. It's the second word attached to it which gives us our meaning of hoarding, because it does mean hurt. The hedge that they put up is a hurtful hedge. It's something that's not going to protect them, as a matter of fact. So somebody who is greedy, they think whatever they're hoarding is going to protect them. They think, my future is secure. They look at their bank account and they look at their full silos and they think, Everything is just going great. And they think, oh, you know what? Because he's not just greedy, he's covetous. They kind of go hand in hand. And so he looks at that new stock that everybody's talking about, and he's thinking, oh man, this is going to go gangbusters. It is such a good thing. I am going to put everything I have into it. And that's what he does. And he wakes up the next morning and sees that it crashes. He has lost everything. That hedge he thought was going to be a help, it didn't just hurt him, it hurt the other people that this passage is talking about. Because it says he had a son. You can't have a son if you don't have a wife, right? Yeah. Greed is not a good thing. Psalm 39, verse 6. This is an interesting passage. Take a look at this, the way that the language that it uses. Kind of get the idea. Oh man, there really are zombies. Anyway, 39:6. Surely every man walks about as a phantom. Put your hands out there. You're going to and fro. You got this blank stare, and all that kind of thing. Surely they make an uproar for nothing. He amasses riches and does not know who will gather them. The person that's walking around as a phantom, that is somebody who absolutely does not have his or her thought processes in the right spot. So they do all of this stuff and it avails them nothing. Luke has another idea for us here. Chapter 12 of Luke, verses 20 and 21. God said to him, "You fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who's going to own what you have prepared? So is the man who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich toward God." Got to be greedy for the right thing. Chapter 6 of Ecclesiastes actually illustrates this. If you look at the first 6 verses, it says here, "There's an evil which I've seen under the sun. It's prevalent among men. A man to whom God has given riches and wealth and honor so that his soul lacks nothing of all that he desires, but God has not empowered him to eat from them, for a foreigner enjoys them. This is vanity and severe affliction." We just read that from Luke chapter 12. "If a man fathers 100 children, lives many years, however many they be, but his soul is not satisfied with good things," the greedy guy, "and he does not even have a proper burial." In Eastern culture, it was an absolutely horrible thing not to have a funeral. Yeah, it was not a good thing, It's actually not look real well in our culture. You guys do know that we have a potter's field here, right? There's a place in the cemetery on the northeast side of town. There's a little sign, Potter's Field. That's where people are buried that had no one to care for them, no one to bury them, no one to give them a proper send-off, as it were. He continues here. "He does not even have a proper burial. Then I say, better the miscarriage than he, for it comes in futility and goes into obscurity, and its name is covered in obscurity. Never sees the sun, never knows anything, better off than he. Even if the other man lives 1,000 years, twice, and does not enjoy good things, do not all go to one place?" So it doesn't matter how long you live, how short you live. If you don't have the right context within your career, you're going to have an absolute miserable, futile existence. And that's really what is discussed here. The irony of greed is that by its very nature, the one greedy will never achieve happiness. Think about it for a minute. You get this because you're greedy. You want more. I'm not happy with this. I need to increase the pile. I need to get more like it. And it becomes a vicious cycle. That's really what hoarding is, what greed is. It never achieves anything. There is Alanis Morissette wrote a song called Ironic. An old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day. Isn't it ironic? You know? Yeah. Okay, so we got the negative out of the way. Let's look at three gifts. We got just a few minutes left here. 3 gifts that God has given us regarding our laborious activities. Okay, this is chapter 5. Let's look at the last 3 verses, beginning in verse 18. Each verse has one of these gifts. We'll talk about that. But he says, here is what I've seen to be good and fitting. We like good and fitting to eat, to drink, and enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him, for this is his reward. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. For he will not often consider the years of his life because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. Excuse me. I want to read just to get the last part of chapter 6 out of our way. It's kind of it's the opposite of the good picture here. And so we get to flip a coin and read chapter 6 verses 7 through 9. It says there, all a man's labor is for his mouth, and yet the appetite's not satisfied. For what advantage does a wise man have over the fool? What advantage does the poor man have, knowing how to walk before the living? What the eyes see is better than what the soul desires. This too is futility and striving after the wind. So that's the opposite. That's the negative of what is being shared here. So the first gift that God has given us is to help us understand, or he wants us to understand, that the basics of life are enough to satisfy. Enough to satisfy. You know, if you don't like your job, find one that you do like. Okay? There's no sense going to work, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, however, and you come home and, you sit down and eat your dinner and, that sadness kind of thing. So you get the picture there. But God is saying, our job, our meals, we can enjoy those, whatever they are. I don't do much cooking, and so when I learn to do something, I'm personally pretty excited about it. I was telling y'all last night at our fellowship that some of you that I learned how to make baked mastacholi. It's like, I'd never heard of mastacholi before in my life until a diaper commercial. That's going to raise some questions. What do those two have to do together? Some guy's singing, and he's talking about the kids and their various, body shapes and styles and activity and movements and stuff. And he says, mastacholi, bod. So I'm thinking, what's mastacholi? So I did some research and I found out about it, found a recipe, and boy, I'm telling you what, I like that stuff. I enjoyed that dinner. I enjoyed leftovers, and I've got a little bit more. I'm going to put a little bit more sauce on it because the pasta likes to soak it up, and I'm going to have mastacholi again today. Yum. Yes. So just enjoy that. Gift number 2 from verse 19. A reward is seen in the labor of one's toil. Enjoy it. This again goes back to the work. It's not just the basics of life, but this is focusing more on your career. Enjoy it. I visited with a lady the other day. Pray for April. She was in a bad car wreck, 2-lane highway going to work. Somebody came into her lane. She had nowhere to go but the other lane. She got in the other lane. The guy saw what he was doing, corrected, came back, hit her head on. So, you know, she is, she's kind of she's in a bad way, you know, but anyhow, and I'm trying to think, why did I go that route? She's on her way to work. She enjoys teaching, you know, and she can't wait to get back to work, but she is beat up. I mean, yeah, she looked like she went all 15 rounds with Muhammad Ali, and she wasn't able to throw anything but one right because there's no break, but her hand is just black and blue from where, you know, it hit the dash or the dash hit her hand, whatever. But anyhow, keep April in prayer. Gift number 3 from verse 20. Our life will pass, however long, however short, okay? But God says we can let that life pass with a gladness of heart. That's just found in contentment. I'm content with what my meal is. When I was growing up, my dad said I had a champagne taste on a beer budget. Sometimes he would say, son, you got a steak taste on a hamburger budget. I wished I would have learned a lot earlier in my life how to make a really good hamburger, and I wouldn't worry about the steak. You know what I'm saying? Anyhow, there's a summary that should not be overlooked, and this is in verse 10 at the end of chapter 6. Whatever exists has already been named, and it's known what man is, for he can't dispute with him who is stronger than he is. There are many words which increase futility. What then's the advantage to a man? For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile life? He will spend them like a shadow. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? The point of those 3 verses in chapter 6 is just to ask a question. Who understands better what our existence will be than God? Right? Last Friday was the 3rd year anniversary of the death of Rush Limbaugh, and he offered a monologue some years ago about a phone call by a 13-year-old boy named Billy. And Billy was distraught. You know, I don't know what the specifics were of the phone call. I don't know the specifics about, you know, Billy's words there, but it had something to do with the media and the negative way that they were reporting the job situation, okay, which is kind of interesting in and of itself that a 13-year-old's concerned about work. Anyhow, I like Billy so far. Rush offered some wise instruction relative to our discussion. And what have we discussed this morning? You know, we've talked about bad behavior. It's going to happen. Satan is busy. You know, we just need to understand that God is actually in control. We've talked about careers. You know, you can make a choice to be covetous or greedy, you know, or you can just be content. You know, that choice really is up to you. But Rush said that there should be a proper focus within a person's life pursuit. He said you should have a love of what you do. If you love it, be the best at it. Rush said that he had been fired from a number of jobs, and one job that he actually quit, he said that when he was there, he was absolutely broke. He was surrounded by people that were the exact opposite. and his focus was to make as much money as he could. He left that job after a year because he was so miserable with that goal. And it just makes sense. If you love it, be the best at it. You will enjoy your career far more. Do you love your job? Okay. If not, ask yourself, what do I like doing? Find a job that fits that description and then be the best at it. But here's a better question. If we are calling ourselves Christian, do you love being a Christian? That's a good question. If you love being a Christian, be the best at it that you can. Amen? Now, if you need help to be the best Christian you can be, that's what we're here for. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7. All right? You can homework. You look that up later. That's what we're here for, is to help each other do that. So if there's any need you have, won't you let us know while we stand and sing? Through eternal ages let his praises ring. Glory in the